American created characters. I'm talking about the one which originated in comics and graphic novels, of course, and they're worldwide known. Whether it's from Marvel and DC, they're superheroes, of course, or skybound characters like The Walking Dead or Invincible, or even The Boys. These characters are available and renowned even in places where their respective comics are not even published. How did we get there? Like, characters, brands have developed beyond their original medium, our beloved comics and graphic novel. How is it even possible? And why? Well, the size of American comics in the world. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm your host, Fabrice Sapolsky. This is Fake Fridays. Yeah. All right. If you follow this channel, you know I was in France a few weeks ago. And if you don't follow this channel, hit the subscribe button right now and watch the Angoulême special episode. That was the last episode, so you don't have to look very far. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. This is a good one. So I was in France late January 2024, and what I saw did not sit well with me. See, I've always been a huge advocate of American comics. In 1998, that's a long time ago, in France, my home country, I founded the first ever news magazine about American comics. It was called Comic Box. If you're curious, look online, folks. And when I left France 9 years ago, the market share of American comics was almost like 10%. Sadly, as I learned during my trip, it is now only 3% in 2023. It completely collapsed. As you can see here. As you can see on my left, 50% of graphic novels currently sold in France are manga. And the remaining 47 are claimed by French comics, famously known as bande dessinée. In the US too, one of two graphic novels sold is a manga. And it's impossible to differentiate American comics from French comics here. We know that there are French comics published on the American market, publishers like Ablaze, Paper Cuts, Mad Cave, Boom, Magnetic Press, First Second, Fantagraphics, and even my own company, FairSquare Comics, to name a few. They are localizing French comics and publishing it on the American market. They just don't really publicize it as such, which to me is a good thing. I absolutely despise it when comics are segregated, separated by country of origin, which is something you see a lot in Europe. So in percentage, both American market and French market are on par with each other. Now, where it becomes really embarrassing for the US is when you look at the numbers in volume. Let's look at France for starters. Globally, 75 million graphic novels were sold in France in 2023, according to JFK, which monitors sales there. Let me repeat that so that you can understand. 75 million. Yes, 75 million for a country that only counts 68 million people. That's roughly a 900 million euro business. It's like $1 billion or even more, depending on which rate we're using. And almost 40 million copies of them were manga. 70 million were children, middle grade, and YA title. 15 million more were French albums, like genre or humor graphic novels. And what about American comics? They plateaued at 2.4 million copies from last year, a 22% decline from 2022. These figures are mind-blowing for such a small country. And mind you, 2023 was not a good year for comics in France. Now, let's look at the American numbers. This is going to be juicy. On our own market, well, first, let me say, finding accurate and reliable numbers for the American market is harder than finding a needle in a haystack. Circuit Bookscan gives statistics based on ticket sales in bookstores connected with the system. So technically, the book trade market is pretty reliable. Except Bookscan doesn't make a clear distinction between graphic novels and the rest. So the classification is made by age, adult fiction, adult nonfiction, juvenile fiction or nonfiction, young adult fiction and nonfiction, or format like hardcover, softcover. When you try to process graphic novel in their database, you only have access to adult fiction. And we know that children, middle grade, and YA graphic novels represent a big chunk of that market. That said, data shows unspecified graphic novel sales of 27.3 million units in 2023 versus 35 million in 2022. That means that book sales overall dropped by about 22.5%, which is, again, like the same kind of like average trend that you see in France, except the general figure of book sales in the US, including graphic novels, is 767 million books sold. That's a lot of books. Now, these figures don't include the direct market, aka comic book stores, nor include Kickstarter, nor include convention sales or direct-to-consumer sales, which are like growing for publishers. Like if I take my company, for example, it's really growing. It's very important now. Like when we get to conventions, it's about 35 to 40% of our business. So all the numbers that we could gather are going to be partial anyway. Now, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to take a risk and give you an estimate based on my experience, my expertise, and my gut feeling. So, Kickstarter's last published data comes from a panel they held in San Diego last year in 2023. At that time, they've said that sales from comics and graphic novels were over $17 million for the first half of the year. If we extrapolate, that would make about 35 million for a full year, which would translate in about 1.8 million in unit sales. If you acknowledge that the average price of a book on Kickstarter is about $20, which is probably the case. So this is an average number. Now, the direct market. The direct market is a very different beast. I would say it's about 30 to 50% of the volume generated by the book market. That would be about an estimated 15 million copies, all publishers combined. And for that, the only reliable piece of data I have comes from my own publishing company, FairSquare Comics. So I'm going to do something now that very few publishers do right now. I'm going to take a concrete example of what I'm about to demonstrate. Let's take one of our books, our bestseller, Noir is the New Black. The first edition, which was a Kickstarter-only volume, sold 1,600 copies. That's quite a lot for a Kickstarter. The second edition, available through Dynamite, our distributor, and our web store, sold 3,500 copies. And the third edition, that was just released early February 2024, had a 1,500 copies print run and has sold to this date, at the time of this video, 900 copies. So the total is 6,000 copies. These are real numbers. And for a small publisher like we are, this is great. This is like awesome. Not a lot of publishers get these numbers, especially for graphic novels that is now $30 a pop. So direct market sales account for about 45% of sales. And of course, 55% for the direct consumer book market, international market, and libraries. It's in line with my pseudo statistics, right? So according to these rough figures that I insist are pure speculation, like don't come back and say, hey, you said this and it was not true. No. Like, this is pure speculation based, again, on my gut feeling, my experience, and my expertise, all right? But it's very plausible. Like these are very believable numbers, and like I would bet with anyone that my gut feeling is real. Like I think I think I think I'm right. I have no proof to back it up, but I think I'm right. Okay, so following that, the number that I came up with is that the graphic novel direct market would be about 15 million copies sold last year. Of course, this does not include the periodicals market, the periodicals market, the periodical section, which with 3 different distributors and hundreds of store side deals and thousands of variant covers and reprints is extremely difficult to grasp. You have places like Comicron.com and ICV2 that are doing their best to provide reliable data to the world using source like Comic Hub, for example. But even them are in conjecture land, and so am I. So, following by reasoning, between the book scan and the estimated direct market and Kickstarter, we should be between 48 and 52 million copies for American graphic novels. It's not 100% data accurate, but again, it's highly probable. 48 to 52 million graphic novel estimated sales would mean that it's 30% less than the fresh market allegedly. Let me put these numbers next to population numbers. This is fun. France, 68 million population, 350 million books sold, 75 million graphic novels sold. That's 5 books per capita. USA, 330 million population, 767 million books sold, estimated 48 to 52 million graphic novels sold. That's 0.0013 books per capita. My head's about to explode. America is a pint-sized market when it comes to books in general and graphic novels in particular. Why? Well, there's something, pardon the pun, that is cultural about it, but also educational. Like in France, culture in general and books in particular are a serious matter. Just like in Japan, Korea, Spain, Italy, Germany, and many other countries, governments see books as incredibly powerful tools, not just to educate, but also to open minds, to stimulate imagination. It's also a fantastic weapon to evangelize through culture, something that Americans invented called soft power. But in the US, none of that exists, at least not on a federal level. Because I checked, like I went to the list of agencies that the government has, and I couldn't find anything that was close to what they have. There's no government agency that is promoting books and graphic novels. None. There's another thing, and another factor that is extremely important. Like in France, there's a law that prevents big retail chains or big websites like Amazon to discount sales, to discount books too much. And no one can sell a book more or less 5% of the recommended price, of the retail suggested price, which protects smaller independent bookstores and smaller outlets. And as a result, if you want a book, you know that wherever you buy it, it's going to be the same. So why don't you support a small independent bookstore? Well, that doesn't exist here. There's not even a single state, 50 states, there's not a single state that has a law like this, not even New York. And New York has like a lot of bookstores and a lot of independent bookstores, but there's no law that protects books like this. It would be a huge deal. And it certainly is when it comes to French market. Now, the third thing is that culturally, comics are part of the fabric of the cultural narrative that France has put together for hundreds of years. And let me be clear, we have in the United States a lot of actors in our industry that are like really doing their best with what they have, like librarians, like educators, like school teachers. We see a lot of them coming to shows and saying, hey, I'm a school teacher. What do you have to recommend me in your catalog that would help my students understand this and that? And we do our best. We have stuff. A lot of publishers have a lot of books for middle grade, for younger readers, for YA. You have the American Library Association, which promotes all that. They're also doing a fantastic job. You have a graphic novel section that was promoted by a wonderful person called Moni Barrett. Shout out to Moni. She's been promoting graphic novels in libraries forever. I mean, not forever, but like for a long time. So we have the potential. We need to connect the dots. We need to do more to make sure that comics and graphic novels are part of the book system. And yes, I mean, of course, you have Scholastic. Scholastic does a lot to promote comics and graphic novels in schools. But there are all the other publishers like us, the smaller publishers, and we all publish books with a lot of heart and a lot of value. So the fact that the U.S. is a federal country with 50 states could be an advantage, but actually it's not, because at this point it plays against the democratization of culture everywhere. There are a lot of disparities, and I'm not talking just about access. People don't realize that in the United States, it's in libraries that you can find the most books. There are 17,000 libraries in the United States. You don't have 17,000 stores. Like there are like 400 Barnes and Noble, and even if you count places like Amazon or all the .coms that are selling books, it's not as big as libraries. Libraries in the U.S. are a treasure. They are the place that should be the starting point to grow comics and graphic novels in American culture. But it won't be just because Fabrice Sapolsky says it. It won't be just because a lot of retailers says it or a lot of librarians says it. We need a coordinated effort. We need to grow our business also from the top. We need lobbies. Do we have lobbies? I don't know if we have lobbies. The thing is that comics and graphic novels are not a priority for politicians, for representatives. If they were, we would have bigger numbers. If they were, America wouldn't be a bookstore desert in some places. Like, how many bookstores do we have in the United States? Like, I remember when I crossed the country, when I was moving from LA to New York, it was crazy because there were some entire towns without a single bookstore. A bookstore where you sell books that happens to have graphic novels. It's incredible. Like, why don't we have more in train stations? Why don't we have more in airports? I go to airports all the time because I travel all year long to go to conventions. In big airports, you have a bookstore, but you don't have many graphics novels there because space is limited. You have like, what, 50 references? That's about nothing. So you have the big publishers, but then what about us? There are a lot of issues. Books are not really accessible. Thank God we have libraries. But libraries are not enough. And I guess one of the keys to bringing the numbers up in our own country are, of course, places where you can find books. I'm going to do my part. Like, I'm doing my part. Like, I'm doing 30 shows a year, 25 this year actually, like 25 to 30. I'm not ruling out doing more, but it's an investment, and I'm not that young anymore. But it's important. Now, how do we do to bring the market share of American comics up in other countries? Well, we can think about doing comics a little differently and not let a family of comics, superheroes, kind of hide the amount of great independent comics that have been published and that no one knows about outside of here. And this is one of the things that really, like, I would say hurt me and interested me at the same time. And it's like French publishers, when they are acquiring licenses, they're acquiring licenses based on name recognition, brand recognition, and they think that they're going to avoid a failure like that. Well, newsflash, you need to commit. You need to believe in the book enough so that you will defend it. Like, yes, there's this particular phenomenon in France where the size of the book can play for or against the book itself. Like I was mentioning in my previous video, the James Tynion IV horror book, The Last House on the Lake, where the French publisher Urban Comics, they decided to make it to publish it oversized in order to trick retailers and making them believe that it was an original French book, and that way they would order easily. But the same thing happens in here. Like if your books are oversized, retailers won't order as many as they could have if they are under or equal to 10 inches height. So I understand. I understand that retailers have preferences, and sometimes you have to kind of like bend your reality in order to make your book visible and make your book orderable and make your book a success. But there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. I want to come back to France the next time and be able to say, hey, the market share of American comics has grown because a lot of American publishers have understood that they need to publish, they need to meet audiences in the middle. They need to take a step forward and try to understand international audiences. And in return, French publishers need to do the same with their own books. Too many French books are unpublishable in the U.S. because the subjects are completely irrelevant to American audiences, or there's cultural appropriation, or there's nudity, which doesn't really fly in some states. So it won't make the books weaker. It will make the books stronger, because if they are like a little more internationally minded, it will benefit everybody. Books will sell more, and we will make more books. Bottom line, what I would say is there's a lot to do. We have a lot of work if we want to grow American comics. And as someone who has a foot on both continents, like I'm from France, but I live in the US. I've been living here for 9 years. And I feel like we all have a role to play in this. And it's not just my fight, but it should be everyone's fight, because I want everyone to learn about the beautiful American creators, the beautiful comics that are made here. Yes, we have horrible comics. I'm not going to lie. We have horrible comics. I see them all the time. but there are also incredible comics with a lot of substance. And I wish more people knew about it. On this note, I'll see you in the next one. And don't forget to subscribe for a new episode of Fridays.